on? We are back with episode 14 of the Anonymous Throwdown podcast, and today I am joined by. We have some good things to go over today. Unfortunately, Salvage and Slickmoth will not be able to join us. They both got irritable bowel syndrome, so they're going to go get that checked out, and then hopefully they'll be back next week. So let's just kick it off. There was a new Christopher Nolan movie that released worldwide, but more specifically in the US kind of this week we started seeing it. And so Dustin, you said that you got a chance to see it, so why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, so it came out, I believe, the first, right? September 1st,
I think
or
so.
no, I think it
Yeah.
was the third or fourth, actually. But that came out, and I saw it early access. So I saw it the last day of August, the 31st, with a theater of maybe 15 people over a huge
Wow. Yeah.
IMAX theater. So what I can say is definitely see it in theaters if you can, if it's safe. And yeah, like have you seen it by any chance?
I haven't, but it was because of that reason. I was actually going to go yesterday, and just the seats were filled up, and I didn't want to risk going. So
Yeah, no, definitely. Like, it's a good movie. Don't get me wrong. It's not good enough to die
Mhm.
over. So
Right. So it's not
definitely,
Nolan's best.
yeah, play it by ear. It's better than Dunkirk. It's same level as Inception, maybe, and it's definitely below the Batman trilogy that we got. In terms of like his own stuff that he's made, like his own story, I'd say it's probably my favorite story that he's done. There's a lot of really cool things, but it's really a movie that's plot focused instead of character
Yeah.
focused. I know last episode Kobe actually talked about that, how not Kobe, Christopher Nolan isn't very good at writing characters, and I'm gonna be honest, he's not. The main character of Tenet
Yeah.
doesn't even have a name. They call him
Yeah, that's what I've
protagonist.
heard.
His official name is protagonist, and like other
Yeah.
characters do have names, but no one is fleshed out to any degree besides maybe Elizabeth Debicki's character, and even then, she's just a Bond girl, pretty much. She's just a really badass Bond girl, and that's her entire role in that movie. This movie seems like he had a good draft for a James Bond movie and needed some
Mhm.
time travel shit in it. That's really the best way I can explain it. And yeah,
Yeah,
it's like a solid
Nolan
7 out
really
of 10.
likes time. 7 out of 10.
Yeah, it's weird that he likes time because he can't do it that well, to be honest.
Yeah,
Because
I've noticed that because that's been a pretty major focus of his films, from Inception to Interstellar to Tenet now. With the Dark Knight trilogy, it was a little bit different because he was focused on adapting a superhero trilogy. But even in Batman Begins, I mean, he did kind of a weird non-linear way of telling the story. And then with Dunkirk, he played around with three different settings, and each one had a different time uh, capacity that it was going through. Yeah, that is interesting. What was your theater experience like? You mentioned that there were only 15 people, and
yeah,
so I was able to see. So I haven't seen Tenet yet, but my theater has kind of been doing some screenings for older movies, so I have been able to safely go see the original Ghostbusters and The Fugitive. And so it was definitely different. Like, it was nice to be back in a theater, but it's almost surreal, just because like you go in and there's no one in the lobby, and then like during the movie you're not really getting much of an audience reaction, so there's something nice about it where it's not as distracting, but it feels almost a little bit hollow.
I'd say it's definitely a hollow experience as like what it used to be. But I
Yeah.
can say as someone who likes to not be disturbed when they watch a movie, like I just like to sit down and watch it. I'm one of those freaks where I can just go watch a movie in the theaters by myself and be
Yeah.
100% content. So as a solo moviegoer, it was a great experience. It's definitely one of those things where it's a little surreal. It seems like
Mhm.
dystopian in a way because there's maybe, like I said, 15 people in my tenant showing, and granted that was an early access showing, so not many people are going to pay 17 $18 to see a movie early. So that was a limited audience to begin with, and even with COVID that just shrinks that down lower. But yeah, it was a very good theater experience. I'm trying to think of the word to use to describe it. It's definitely nice. I can say that. I
Yeah.
feel safer in a movie theater than I do in like a grocery store.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. It feels like they have some really good procedures for social distancing, but then also cleaning. With that said, there are some movies that I opted out of going to the theater for, probably mainly for just convenience, but also for some of that safety. Uh, and it's been interesting because it feels like every new release has kind of a different way that they're releasing it. So this last weekend we got Tenet, and then we got Mulan from Disney, and they're doing that exclusively on Disney Plus, and you have to pay $30 to watch it. And then you also had Bill and Ted 3, which did both. It is on streaming platforms, but it's also in the theater, so you can kind of choose. Um, it's going to be interesting to see what they do going forward, and which one movies gravitate toward for a little bit, because COVID is still very prevalent. I know that here in Utah, it started going down for a little bit, but now we're back up to just hundreds of cases every day. So I'm not exactly sure what they're going to do, but yeah.
Yeah, and on that same note of like new releases. So I saw New Mutants in theaters. I have not seen Bill and Ted, but from what I know, Bill and Ted is absolutely smashing it right now.
Yeah.
So like I'm pretty sure they're number one on the iTunes digital charts for movies, and like it's advertised everywhere. Like on my Apple TV subscription, it was like front page every time I loaded it up, and every time I go by like a drive-in movie theater, I see Bill and Ted just lining it. And
Yeah.
I'm very curious to see how that approach works differently to like Tenet, because Tenet actually launched and it's actually making a bit of a scare as to the movie theater, like the future of movie theaters in America. Exactly,
Hmm.
because how I know it is like America is a superpower in terms of theaters. We are the top market when it comes to a film.
Yeah.
But with this COVID shit going on, we might get dethroned. And that we might
Hmm.
not bounce back for a long time in the movie theater industry. And since we're such a big market, if they lose the movie theater industry in America, I mean, they're really gonna have no reason to go straight to theaters anymore. And I think
Yeah.
we'll definitely see a trend of movies just altogether skipping the theater and just going straight to streaming, whether that be VOD or on a Disney Plus or an HBO Max or whatever. And with Milan specifically, that's a $30 rent. And like, I don't think
Yeah.
it's a rent. I think you keep it. Like, it
Yeah. I
stays
think
on
it
your
is
account,
added permanently to your Disney Plus library.
which
Yeah.
is a good and bad thing. But
Yeah.
a big but there. As a solo moviegoer like me, where I don't have any children, the most I can like say is I have a girlfriend. I'm not going to watch Mulan with my girlfriend for $30. I could
Right.
see anything else for that same price in a theater, or I could rent, Bill and Ted for like $10 or however much they're selling that for. I could see a lot of movies for the
Hmm.
same price as one showing of Mulan. And as someone who's not very interested in Disney live action stuff to begin with, there's really no
Yeah. I'm
market
over
for
it.
that. Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
terrible. I mean, I saw Lion King not that long ago, and that was,
Ugh. Yeah.
they really should just leave it alone.
Yeah,
Like,
I was talking about this on Twitter earlier today, actually, and someone made the point of no Disney live action film has justified its existence. The only one that I even will give a little bit of credit to was Jungle Book, but it's because that was really, and that one isn't even because I think it's like a really great retelling. It's because it kind of re-revolutionized CGI and photorealism with these animals and this environment that was all completely green screen, and so that was impressive, but like the movie itself wasn't really the selling point. It was the technology. And then Lion King didn't really, I mean, I guess it improved it, but we'd already been wowed by Jungle Book, so there was really no point in revisiting Lion King and doing a shot for shot remake. And that's how I feel with most of them. It feels very cash grabby. Like I remember seeing Aladdin and just thinking that feels like they literally just rolled through the motions, just to have the live action version that I don't think is as good as the animated version.
I actually forgot that came out. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah,
That's a Guy Ritchie
yeah,
movie, right?
hmm
That's
yeah. Guy
weird.
Ritchie directed it. Yeah.
That's really weird. I mean, I'm assuming most of our audience doesn't know exactly who Guy Ritchie is, and that's fair.
Yeah.
He's a very violent gang. He likes dealing with like gangs and stuff most of the time. He likes
Hmm.
having very violent set pieces. Not like gory, but just violent. A lot of hand-to-hand combat. So it's really weird. He released a movie last year too that was not Aladdin. I forget what it's called, but I'm sure you remember it where it was about
Yeah, I
the
know what you're
fish
talking
gang.
about, but yeah, yeah.
So it's really weird that he's pulling like a Kenneth Branagh and or Branagh or however you say his last name, where he's directing like two movies a
Hmm.
year. Because
Yeah.
Kenneth Branagh did Artemis Fowl this year, which is also another. I don't know if that's a remake, but I know it was definitely a book. And he's also doing that Death on the
Yeah.
Nile movie. That's like a sequel
Hmm.
to Murder on the Orient Express, and he's also actually in Tenet.
Yeah. Yeah, he is. He's
And
kind of a jack of all trades when it comes to he's done that really for his whole career where he does the writing or generally he doesn't write, but he directs and acts and very often he'll cast himself as the lead in his films. I remember he did a Frankenstein movie many years ago where he cast himself as the lead, and it was kind of a mess. He's gotten a little better. I liked Orient Express, but he's still very hit and miss. Artemis Fowl was a complete nightmare from what I've heard.
and he also did Thor 1, right?
Yeah, he did.
Oh wow. Man, he's a very big fan of Dutch angles, huh?
Yes, he is.
That's one of the things I actually learned in film school is Dutch angles. Do not overuse them. They are
Yeah,
extremely disorienting to an audience if everything
they
is
really are.
askew like that. And I've seen a lot of his films. He has not done that often. It was egregious in that movie.
Yeah, it's like every other shot is like tilted and it's a Dutch angle. I remember even when I was like when that movie came out, I don't actually remember how old I was. It's funny. I was probably early teens, but even then, before I was really into how films were made and how shots were composed, I remember thinking, why are all the shots like this? Like I even then I thought it was bizarre.
I mean, that was
It
back
was
when
distracting enough that even someone who didn't know what like the construction of filmmaking is would be distracted by it. And that's what you never want to do. You never want bad filmmaking to like be recognized by the audience.
especially ones that are just casual moviegoers who aren't actually in tune with when I saw like Dunkirk like for instance, one thing that distracted me was the way that the aspect ratio would change on a shot for shot basis. And
Yeah.
like an average moviegoer is not going to notice that. I'm going to notice that. Tenet did it a couple
Hmm.
times too, if I'm not mistaken. But if it's that glaring of an issue to where even like a casual moviegoer can see it. Unlike the aspect ratio thing, if you can notice the Dutch angle thing, which for the audience, if they don't know what a Dutch angle is, it's when you get a camera and you just basically tilt it at like a 45-degree angle,
Yep.
and they shoot from like a lower angle, so it makes everything look big and like grandiose. And
Yeah, and
there's
it's not that it's like something that you never do, but it's something where like with well, we can go back to Nolan and like the Dark Knight trilogy. Like in the Dark Knight, he's known for breaking the 180 rule. In that scene where Joker and Batman are having their conversation, but it's because it's what the story is kind of dictating, where you're supposed to feel a little bit disoriented,
Mhm.
and the writing and acting is compelling enough that you're distracted from that breaking of the 180 rule. Whereas with Thor 1, it's like every establishing shot is like a Dutch angle.
like, for instance, I can remember like three off the top of my head. One where he's in the
Hmm.
bar when he gets first into
Yep.
Earth, and it's like from the ground looking up at him while he's just at this table. And also when they introduced Clint, when they do Hawkeye, he's on top of like a tower or something with his bow. And it's like a Dutch angle showing the size of the tower, and it's like, okay, we get it. Like this is a big
Yeah.
scale movie or whatever. I don't get what his deal was there. And I mean that goes into the earlier part of Marvel where they really didn't know what to do because like Kenneth
Yeah.
Branagh is a good director. I forget who did Captain America, but I know it's a really good director. Do you
Hmm.
remember who that is off the top of your head?
Not off the top of my head, but yeah, I agree. It's actually kind of interesting though, because even though some of those have improved with Marvel over the years, like technically Avengers Endgame is a very well shot and well made movie. But I do feel that phase one, even though there were technically some more glaring issues on the filmmaking side of things, I also feel like each one had a little bit more of a distinct personality to it. And I don't know, that I guess is also my most glaring issue with the Disney remakes. Is you get Guy Ritchie directing Aladdin, but you would never guess that it's a Guy Ritchie movie, despite him being a super uh, specific auteur who makes his films in a very specific way. You'd never know it was him unless you saw it directed by at the end.
Yeah, no, that I didn't even know that movie existed until you just brought it up. Like I knew it existed, I just never saw it because I didn't even like
Right.
Aladdin when I was a kid. And so for them to get someone like Guy Ritchie, who is a white European guy, to direct Aladdin, which has Will Smith as a blue mummy in it, and just CGI everywhere. It didn't encapsulate me. Also, on a
Yeah.
side tangent, Captain America is directed by Joe Johnston, who also did Jumanji, The Rocketeer, Honey I Shrunk the Kids,
Yeah.
Jurassic Park 3. Like he is a great director. There is no flavor in that first Captain America movie.
Yeah.
None whatsoever. It's very boring.
Generic. Yeah.
I remember as a kid, I got bored for the first half because it's a war movie, and then the last half it has like Cap throwing his shield at like Nazis with blue lasers,
Hmm.
and he straight up punches a guy into a turbine, and blood comes out,
Yeah, I do remember that.
and it's like really edgy for a Marvel movie. Like someone just gets straight up killed, and they do the same thing. And I think Winter Soldier, like someone is it Sam punts someone and they go flying up into the sky and they get sucked down into a turbine. And it's like you just straight
I
up
don't
fucking
remember that,
murdered that
but
guy.
that sounds familiar. That sounds familiar, but I don't remember that. Yeah.
It goes into the thing of like it looks cool, but at the same time they're fucking murdering people.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
and like none of the Avengers have a no kill rule off the top of my head. I mean maybe Spider-Man, I guess.
Yeah, Spider-Man kind of alludes to it, but I don't know that it like with Batman in the comics and stuff, he's very adamant of like I do not kill. Whereas with Spider-Man, I think it's more just as long as he never like purposefully is going to kill someone.
Yeah, and I know like Iron Man doesn't care. Thor
Yeah.
doesn't
Yeah.
care. Hawkeye does not care. Hawkeye drops bodies in these movies. Hulk definitely doesn't
Yeah.
care. He
Well,
claps
but you're
like
right
five
though, because
strikers.
like with that first Captain America, you're right with that shot though, because I remember watching it and it's almost PG. Like it's barely a PG-13 movie, as many of the Marvel movies are. Like they just generally say a few too many S words and it bumps it up to PG-13. But that shot, I remember being a little bit shell shocked because it's near the end of the movie, and it just kind of feels like it's from out of nowhere.
I mean, from the director of Jurassic Park 3, I can see that coming because Jurassic Park 3 has the same issue where the first half
Yeah,
isn't that violent, and the second half, I think it's dinosaurs loose in like Los Angeles where they're just eating people out of the like
yeah.
shots and everything. It's very gratuitous, and that director has an issue with it. His last credit was on the Nutcracker movie that came out 2 years ago, which, by the way, I didn't know there was a Nutcracker movie that came out 2 years ago.
Yeah, I never saw it.
It's a Disney
I
movie.
only knew that because I worked at a movie theater, so I'd always see the trailers for new releases. So that's the only reason I even knew it existed, but I never was interested enough to go see it.
That movie made $4 at the box office, guaranteed. That is the
Yeah.
most. It has Keira Knightley in it, really? Wow, she stooped
Yeah.
low. That's sad.
Yeah.
But what was next on our list to talk about?
Yeah, so I think we could use this kind of to segue into film school. So I know that you do Los Angeles Film School online. I go to a 4-year university. I don't want to say which one just because it's pretty local, but I am in the film program, so it's significantly cheaper, but it's one of the best film programs. Unless I were to move to California.
Mhm.
But I don't know. I think that since it's just you and me, and since we're both kind of in that field, it might be interesting to kind of just go over our experience and maybe some things that we've learned that maybe people who aren't as familiar with the behind the scenes process of filmmaking might be interested to know.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I know that for me, the most fascinating thing really was just to see the amount of work that goes into these things. And I know that a lot of people will say that that's really obvious, but I feel like it's honestly something that's understated a lot. I'm currently in a class where I'm learning cinematography, but I'm not learning camera setups. I'm learning how the electricians do their jobs and how like the gaffers and the best boys all interplay with the set and just how particularly sets are run. And it's kind of interesting because you look at that and that's just production. With pre-production, just seeing how many scripts are submitted every year that get instantly rejected, seeing how editing works, seeing that it's not generally done on, Premiere Pro. So I guess for me, it's just interesting to see that it's definitely not what I expected. It's still something that I really enjoy, but it's a far cry from when, we're like 16 making short films and it's kind of just point and shoot at that. Yeah, okay, we got that line, point and shoot at that. It's like very particular how it's done. And it's very strict how the different roles are done. For example, if you're a crew member, you're not really supposed to approach the director. You want to like if you're working under the director of photography, you want to go to like the assistant director of photography, and then he'll kind of climb your suggestion or whatever up the chain of command. But if you were to go like make a suggestion to the director, you'd get roasted on the spot. Like you'd probably be fired right then. And it's kind of the same deal with writing. Like a lot of and this is funny. I don't want to be mean, but I always see like kids on Twitter who are like, "Yeah, I'm a screenwriter." And it's like, okay, are you willing to sit down, write a 90-page script, and then write it again 12 times before it's going to be any good whatsoever? So I don't for me it really was just seeing the amount of work that goes into making a film and just how particular each role of that is.
Yeah, I mean, a film set is kind of akin to a well-oiled machine. So, it has its small parts, and then it has its big parts. Like, for instance, so you were talking about like the gaffers and stuff. Those guys on set probably make what, 25 an hour at most.
Hmm. And many of them are
Versus
pulling all-nighters.
working, I mean, a film set, you're working 16 to 18-hour days, depending on
Yeah.
how big of a production it is. I mean, if you're working on like Avengers Endgame, where they filmed it for like what, 6 months straight,
Yep.
and you're working 5 6 days a week, 18 20 hour, I mean 16 18 hour days, where it's nothing but doing two maybe three scenes a day, two if you're lucky, three if you're really pushing it, and you do the same scene over and over and over again. I had to edit a clip for school, right? And it was this
Yeah.
office setting clip, and it was like a little short film to show how complicated editing is, and how it kind of gave an insight on how much the shit they shoot on reels. So it's this thing called meeting day where it really isn't a plot. It's just like a 2 minute long clip, right? So you have to
Hmm.
go from the master shots, like shot A, B, one, and then they shoot that same shot 5 times. And then your job
Yeah.
as editor is to go out and siphon, like, pick through the clips that you got and see how they go together cohesively, add in sound effects, and it really makes you appreciate the smaller things in these films, how they're constructed, or as you grow older, even I'm sure you've noticed this. The more you watch a film, you see a big set, you're like, wow, that probably took thousands of people, like actual
Yeah.
days to do. And it goes into like the Twilight Zone territory. Like, did you ever see the movie, the
No, I
Twilight
didn't.
Zone movie? It's from the 80s, and the John Landis segment in that, which unfortunately two people passed away, or three people passed away in that from a
Yeah.
helicopter crash.
I have read about that.
That was a huge set. That was like a couple acres big of just
Hmm.
pure set, where it's, fake houses and huts built from the ground up. So it really goes a long way in making you appreciate it. And as someone who is in film school, I'm going, online. I'm more into the digital side of things. So I'm not on the location doing a lot of it, but I am learning the process of it. And then I just go and apply it to my own real life circumstances. So, like, for instance, in the fall, I'm doing a music video for some friends. And I'm flying out to New York, and I'm going to do that for them. And with the knowledge I got from school, I can go do that. Now, my experience is a little bit different from yours just because I'm purely online. So, like, my school monthly has a different course. Right now I'm in creative writing, but I have done like screenwriting, editing, things like that. So I do have a very blanket understanding of what I can do. Film school, I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, but film school is not to make you an expert at anything. It's so that you can find what you
Right.
excel at and then pursue it and practice it until you become really good at it. No one goes to film school. No one, there's not a directing class. There's no class that's like
Mhm.
we are talking about directing every day, all day for 4 years. That's not how
Yeah.
that works. You alternate your roles in film school, and that's really one of my favorite things about it is you never get tired. You're always learning something new. It's not like you're in school and you're doing English and it's like, okay, well, read Of Mice and Men and do this worksheet or whatever, where it gets very boring because you're reading a 150-page book over 4 weeks, I think.
Yeah.
It's never like that. Film school is very fast paced.
It
There are
is.
no dull moments.
Yeah, it's fast paced, and it is interesting because if you're of like if you do have the talent and the drive to really pursue it, you're gonna have a lot of fun with it. But a story that I always like to tell, because since people in like my neighborhood know that I'm in film school, their kids often will ask me about it because they're interested. And the story that I always like to tell is, you got to make sure that it's what you really want to do. Like go in knowing how these things are made, because I remember the first day that I went into film school, first class, it was like an auditorium setting and they were introducing us to the program and everything. It was like packed house, like standing room only. By the end of the semester, the room was maybe 40 or 50% full. And it's because what happens is people will think, oh, I don't really know what I want to do, so I'm just going to go ahead and make movies. And then they go in and realize it is a lot of work. It's very fast paced and a lot of fun if you are into it. But if you don't really have an understanding of how the craft works, you're probably not going to have a lot of enjoyment with it. And it is definitely, it's not what I expected. Like, I'm really fortunate that it's still something that I'm really passionate about. And if you're passionate about that storytelling process, you're probably going to enjoy it. But yeah, you're definitely right in regards to it's not this like high school setting where you take a course and you complete it and you're good and you have the qualification. It's not like getting a degree in law or medicine or something where you complete your degree and then you have the qualifications that you need to really get a job doing it anywhere or start your own firm or whatever. With film, it's different because it's much harder to find opportunities to make money practicing your craft as a filmmaker. Uh, so a lot of times you're not only paying tuition, but you're also pulling money out of your pockets to make short films, and that's the only way that you can really make it, quote unquote, in the industry. It's not going to film school. The biggest push that I've gotten from film school is getting more technical knowledge and also finding or having better access to opportunities to network. But that's really the only way that you're going to make it is if you're making short films, if you're trying to write features, if you're out networking with people, and if you're building your brand. Film school doesn't do that automatically for you. And that's the reason why you see so many people graduate. Like at my university, tons of people have graduated this program and just never gotten anywhere. And it's because they like the capstone project is literally to make a short film. So it's not even like this big, crowning thing. Like every filmmaker ever has made a short film. So you really have to be the one to take the initiative. Film school will give you the technical knowledge that you need, but if you really want to do it, you got to do it all on your own.
Yeah, I mean, like, for those who don't know, I know a lot of reviewers are like not in college yet. A capstone is like a big final project that they make you do
Yeah.
to prove that you know. And like, I have friends who are into the computer science, world, and they had to write like a 50-page paper for their capstone,
Yep.
and that makes me feel fortunate that the only thing I'd have to do per se is just make a short film. Because as someone who did a bunch of short films as a kid, a lot of that is just knowledge I gained over the years. Granted,
Yeah.
there's a lot more technical aspects thrown on there. Like now I'll need to know how to frame a shot, how to edit it, how to do sound design, how to dress a set, how to make a set good, how to do costume design, things like that. But that all comes with the territory. I mean, if you're passionate about something, and not just film, just anything, look into some post-secondary options for it. Because
Yeah.
a lot of people think that school isn't for them, and I was actually one of those people. School's very gratifying if you go into a subject that you're actually passionate about and have a drive to accomplish things and get better and actually be well known at some point. Like, for me,
Yeah.
it's not about the fame, it's just wanting my work to get seen
Hmm.
and, appreciated or whatever. Like, I know I'm not going to be the next David Lynch or John Carpenter or whatever, but if I can direct one film that's relatively big, I'd have made it.
Yeah.
No one's looking for mainstream success in film school. Those who are the
Exactly.
ones who drop out
Yep.
because that's not how Hollywood works. You work your way up. I mean,
No. Yeah, if you want to get into the mainstream, which is very possible, it's not like it's a lot of people say, oh, getting into the industry is really hard. And logistically it is. But at the same time, uh, and the reason people say that is because it takes luck. But the thing with that is that if you're pushing and you're putting work out there, you're eventually going to get some kind of lucky break. Now, that doesn't guarantee that it's going to be a huge break, but chances are if you're working at it really hard, you're going to find some type of success or potential career that you could build out of it. I guess one question that I have for you is are you more interested in like indie filmmaking, or would you be interested at some point to get offers to work on potentially some bigger films?
I would love to do a blockbuster.
Yeah.
I would absolutely love it, even if it's total trash. Like, say I direct like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3.
Yeah.
I would still love that film dearly because that's such a huge crowning achievement. Like,
Yeah.
I know, like, I just brought up David Lynch. He did one blockbuster, which was Dune from 1984. He hates it and he disavows it, but he's still probably proud of it in the sense that
Right.
he was
At
working on
least
a
the
set with
experience of working on it.
over 1,400 people on it, and he was doing all these big set pieces. The film was like a big blockbuster at the time. It was supposed to be the next Star Wars, and for it not to do that, I'm sure must have been devastating. But it also wasn't his fault. It wasn't his film that even came out. So, that also has to be a hit. But if I can have some kind of like creative freedom in a blockbuster, I think that'd be amazing. I like indie films, but there's really not much you can do in the sense of like action. Not even just action, but
Yeah.
like higher scale things. Like, for instance, I want to make something in size akin to like the movie Seven by David Fincher. That's not a
Hmm.
blockbuster and that's not indie either. I want to be in like that range where I can direct a movie with a budget of 10 million or 50 million and
Yeah.
still be able to do both. Now, granted, I would not trust myself to direct a film like In Game where the budget's $300 million.
Right.
I would have a mental breakdown.
Yeah.
And logistically, those films are nightmares. For the directors, not so much, but I know for the producers, like Kevin Feige, there's a reason he's bald.
Yeah. Well, and there's also a reason that people feel that the MCU has like lost its flavor. It's because when you're working with so many films of this scale, I mean, this is the longest, arguably the longest running movie franchise. If you look at every movie as an entry of the same franchise, and every single one is a multi-million dollar picture, there's a reason that they are very strategic about how they're made.
Yeah, and Marvel movies have made about 22 or 23 billion dollars worldwide. That's insane. Fun fact: the
Yeah.
top three franchises ever, the MCU is number one, right? Guess what
Yep.
number two is?
How many movies are in the franchise? Like, is it
Four.
trilogy or is it longer for Indiana Jones?
It's Avengers.
Oh wow. So
So
it's a subcategory of that initial
yeah, so I think
franchise.
it goes MCU, Avengers, and then it goes down to I think Fast and the Furious because
Wow,
their
yeah.
last few films have actually made a lot of money. I know with
Yeah.
Fast 7 or
They
6, the
got
one
good.
where
I like,
one
yeah.
yeah, the one where Paul Walker passed away right after that, that one made over a billion
Oh, yeah.
dollars.
That was a really good, yeah. They did a good tribute for him, but even more than that, just I actually thought that was a really well done movie.
I
James
mean,
Wan did a good job with that one.
they're embracing the weird, which is something you have to do. There's nothing more gratuitous than a film that doesn't know when to not take itself seriously.
Right.
And that's why like Marvel movies, they never take themselves seriously to a fault. Like
Yeah.
Spider-Man Far From Home, for instance. I don't remember any serious moments in that movie where there were any stakes on the line for more than maybe four
Yeah.
minutes. And
Hmm.
that actually ended up being detrimental to the final film, or not to the final film, but yeah, to the final film, like the final cut of the film. That is a detriment to the quality of that film. Now, I think
Hmm.
that Marvel is a company that listens and they like to learn and observe what their competition's doing. So, seeing how Joker cracked $1 billion, do you think that they'd ever go in a route of making something more edgy, not necessarily R-rated, but something darker, something akin to like a Zack Snyder, but better kind of situation?
So I think that's a good point because it seems like Marvel is now like when Venom first came out, they were like, we want nothing to do with that movie. That isn't part of the MCU. But now suddenly with Morbius and some of these darker Sony movies, it feels like Marvel Studios is kind of slowly starting to like bring them under their wing. Like, yeah, you guys can use Michael Keaton's Vulture in this movie. And so I do wonder, especially with suddenly Venom 2 got Andy Serkis as director, and it's suddenly getting all of these really great writers and producers. And I can't help but wonder if Marvel Studios is kind of whispering into Sony's ear, like, "Hey, you should pull on this dude, and you should bring on this guy." And so I wonder if they're going to do it through that setting. Now, I do struggle to think that they would ever do like an edgy R-rated movie within like the direct Marvel Cinematic Universe, just because it is still owned by Disney. But I could see them doing it through Sony. They back when Sony well Fox has done it with some of their Marvel owned properties. But that's really the extent that I'd see them going. I feel like Joker, they even though it did super well, I think that they also still recognize that it was a pretty big risk. So I don't know that they would do it unless, like I mentioned, it's through Sony. And then I don't know if Venom 2 is like really good, then maybe they'll be in negotiations to try and acquire more creative control over those films.
And oh man, let me just say, Venom 2 is not going to be good. You
Yeah.
need to get that out of the way. That's not going to be
Well,
like
I
no.
so I liked the first one, but not because it was a good movie. I liked it because I liked Tom Hardy, and I thought he did a really good job of bringing some comedic levity to a pretty weak script. But yeah, as yeah, I feel like Venom 2 is kind of going to be in the same boat with
I
that
mean,
one.
Andy Serkis has never directed a good movie. In my
Yeah, that's true.
experience with his films that he's directed, he is a great actor, absolutely
Yeah.
fantastic. Whether it's live action or CGI, whether it be like Caesar or anyone else he's done, he kills it. I mean, he was what Ulysses Claw in Black Panther.
Yeah, and then you look at that and then you look at Gollum from Lord of the Rings, and it's like just
That's the
the
same guy,
biggest gap. That's so much range as an actor.
and he's also Alfred Pennyworth now,
Yep.
and that's gonna be crazy. Which, by the way, on a side note to Batman, can we talk about how shitty it is for Matt Reeves that 2 days back on set, his main
Oh my
actor
gosh, yeah.
gets diagnosed with COVID? 2 days, and this is
Yeah,
a movie
I
that
really
comes out in a year.
sympathize with him. Yeah.
I feel so bad
It's
for Matt
really a
Reeves.
pain. That is the Yeah, that's the other thing that you learn at film school is just like I was mentioning, just how particular everything operates. When you have a situation like this, I mean, that is going to affect so many people. I mean, for us as the fans, it's like, oh, the film might get delayed now, and that's a bummer. But the producers are probably like tearing their hair out right now because now they're having to readjust every single schedule. They're paying everybody for their time for being out in London, I think is where they are filming this movie right now. So they're paying the entire cast and crew to be there. They have this whole like immaculate schedule planned out for the shots that they want every single day, and now they have 2 weeks that they have to completely rearrange everything, and potentially more if he's infected anybody or if somebody else gets it, because movie sets are pretty big. There's a lot of people on them, and so it's just such a volatile situation right now. So that is, like, poor Matt Reeves. This guy has he's like 25% done shooting this movie. He still has 75% more to go, and it's still super uncertain as to how it's going to play out.
And granted, he is a fantastic director. Matt
Yeah.
Reeves, you know, he made the Paul Bear with oh man, it's the guy from Friends, David Schwimmer. He made the Paul Bear from 1996. I don't know if
Yeah.
you've seen that, but that's one of the best movies of all time. Absolute 10 out of 10. Him and Gwyneth
Mhm.
Paltrow kill it in that movie. That is sarcasm, by the way. It's a really bad movie,
Yeah.
but knowing that that guy, in a span of 24 years, went from the Paul Bear. Actually, I wouldn't say he retired after the Paul Bear. He took a 4-year break and then he wrote the movie The Yards, which is a James Gray movie with Mark Wahlberg and Joaquin. And then he took an 8-year hiatus and came back with Cloverfield, which by all means is a pretty solid movie.
Yeah.
And then he did Dawn of the Planet of
One of
the
the
Apes.
rare really good found footage gimmicks.
And,
One of the rare times that I felt like it worked for the benefit of the movie.
and I'd say that that's one of the first ones too, right?
Yeah, so there's like Blair Witch, and that one people hate now just because the now found footage has been done to death. And then when you go back, that one actually isn't really that one was actually made almost to like fool people into thinking it was real. So there isn't tons going on. You don't even see the witch or whatever at the end of the movie. The dude didn't pan over like he was supposed to, so there's literally no witch in the movie or anything. So if you go back and watch it expecting a really great horror movie, you're going to be disappointed. But yeah, Cloverfield was one of those first ones that really embraced that it was not only found footage, but it was also Hollywood. And everything since then just hasn't worked for me. I guess
Mhm.
M. Night Shyamalan's the Visit, I think it was. That one I had some enjoyment with, but it's very rare that I even remotely enjoy found footage movies.
Are you talking about the one where the old man smears the shit in the kid's face?
Yes. Yeah.
Yo, I hated that movie.
Yeah. Did
Yeah, The
you?
Visit. It's just like it's
Yeah,
such a
I can
weird
understand
movie.
why. It's very
It's cool.
off-putting.
It has a lot of really cool elements in it, but the fact that a grown man takes his diaper off and smears his feces in a young kid's
Yeah.
face, and
Yeah.
the fact that like the mom wouldn't check to see that the grandparents were who they said they were.
Right. Yeah. It was
It
pretty dumb. It
it wasn't his best and it wasn't his worst by any
yeah.
means. That goes to like
I think that's
Avatar.
probably why I liked it. That's probably why I liked it was because I was expecting it to be like another After Earth or something, and I was like, oh, this actually is like okay. Like there's some weak writing to it, and it's not like his greatest, but it's all right.
Yeah, and back to the Blair Witch. Have you ever seen how they made that film?
To a degree, yeah. Like what part? Do you mean just like on the budget that they did it with, or
Well, the
with
budget was
some of
only
the
25 grand.
yeah, it was very
And
small scale.
I don't know this for a fact, but I would not be surprised if the Blair Witch Project has the widest, margin for profit in film history. Because
Yeah,
that movie had a budget of 25,000. That ballooned up to about 200,000 to 500,000 for marketing, which
yeah.
is still a fairly low marketing budget. The movie made $250 million in
I
1999.
think that's I think that they did that. I think it had so much success because people thought it was real at the time. They really did advertise it like this is found footage. We've discovered this footage of these kids who went looking for this thing. I remember like I read up that the parents of these kids, because they used their real names in the movie, but these parents got like cards from people and they were like, sorry your kid died cards. So
Oh my
people
god.
assumed that this thing was real. And I think that's probably why so many people were invested and why it was the phenomenon that it was. Because watching the movie, it's really not that good. Like it's really shaky camera. But if I had watched that movie in the mindset of, oh, this is real life, I would have been really freaked out because there are weird things that happen. So I feel like that's probably where the success came from. And that's why the sequels, there was one even a few years ago, if I'm not mistaken, just called Blair Witch that did no
Mhm.
one saw and no one cared about. It got bad
I
reviews.
saw
And
it.
it's because once, did you like it?
I actually did. I
Oh,
like the
interesting.
director though.
Yeah, I've just,
I enjoy the director.
yeah,
Who is Adam Wingard? Do you know him by name?
I don't.
He did this fantastic Death Note movie for Netflix a couple years ago.
Oh,
The
yeah, yeah,
live
yeah.
action
Yeah,
Death Note,
I
which a
did see
lot of
that one.
people
I did like that one.
hate. A lot of people hate that movie, like a violent hatred. I think it was just silly enough to where it passes on
Yeah,
to like comedy for me. It's it's a comedy horror movie. A thousand
right.
percent. He's one of those guys where I kind of want to have a similar career trajectory where he started off making kind of low budget things, went on to like medium budget, like 10 million for like Blair Witch or whatever, how much that budget was.
Yeah,
Because that movie wasn't even advertised as Blair Witch for a while. That was known as a different
yeah.
movie until
They
like
had
a
it,
couple
yeah,
months before
like The
release.
Woods or something, and then it's like, oh, it's a Blair Witch sequel. Let's go.
And wasn't that the film that they also showed 10 Cloverfield Lane in? Or was that before
I don't
10
remember.
Cloverfield Lane? Because I remember 10 Cloverfield Lane did something very similar where it was announced like a month before it came out. Do
Oh,
you
I
remember
think
that?
that was it was a Cloverfield one. But it was like the Netflix original version.
Oh no, that
The
was
one
the
where they were
night it
like in
came out.
space. The paradox. Yeah. That one was like the night of.
And that one was really bad.
Yeah.
So
I didn't
I
like that one
remember
at all.
10 Cloverfield Lane came out like a month after it was announced or whatever. Like they had a trailer
I
for it
do
to film.
You're right. Yeah, that one I do remember there being a very small margin between announcement and release for.
And that was a fairly solid movie. 10 Cloverfield
I
Lane.
liked it. Yeah.
I mean, the worst part of these movies is the fact that they're Cloverfield movies. Let's not lie about that. Like, the
Yeah.
way that they shoehorn in the Cloverfield references is abhorrent. It's really bad.
Yeah, it's really, yeah, cuz I remember watching 10 Cloverfield Lane for the first time and I really liked it up until they shoehorned in the aliens at the end. Like truthfully because it was this really great almost misery-esque movie.
Yeah. All right, here we go.
Cool.
Technical difficulties hit.
Yeah. Sorry guys,
Noted.
I dropped internet. It sounds like I got disconnected. So we were talking about 10 Cloverfield Lane when we left off. Uh I was mentioning that I was kind of just reaffirming what Dustin said, which is that I think it's a really solid thriller movie with just it becomes very bizarre when they throw in sci-fi elements at the end of it.
And Cloverfield Paradox, which is some generic sci-fi movie. It at the end, the only connection to Cloverfield is at the end. It shows the pod that they're in fall back to Earth, and they show this Cloverfield monster that's like 10 miles tall,
Yeah,
stand up, and like that was kind of cool. I can't lie. Give me more of that. Give me less of the 2.5 hour long bullshit sci-fi
like
stuff
yeah,
that
yeah.
no one cares about.
It's very weird when they, yeah. I don't know. They should have taken a page out of the BioShock Infinite book because that I at least for me is like the perfect way to do a completely separate story, almost as if it's an anthology, but then still connect it to the original at the end.
hmm And I'm actually still playing through Bioshock Infinite right now.
Yeah.
I haven't played it in a
Have you
while.
not or you so you've beaten it before?
Yeah, like 7 years
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
But I
It's one of
bought
my
it again
favorites.
recently on Switch, and I've been playing through that a little bit.
Yeah,
And that game is a masterpiece, really.
I
I mean,
agree.
it's weird because Ken Levine basically just retired after that. I know Ghost Story Games or whatever they're called is working on something, but
It's
he's
been
never going to
years.
do something the same scale as Bioshock Infinite.
Yeah, he's mentioned that that game, he felt like it aged him like 10 years making it because it was just so crazy. But I agree. It's in my top 3 of all time. I think it's a
How,
fantastic game.
how long was that game in development for? About 5 years?
I think that they intended for it to be like 4 or 5 years, but it ended up stretching to like 6,
Because
somewhere between
Bioshock
5 and 6.
1 came out in what, 2007, right? Early
Yeah, and that
2007?
that one was like a glorified indie game almost. Like it was really good, but they had a really small team, and it was like 2K was kind of just being nice and giving them a chance. Like, all right, you guys have this idea, let's let you run with it. But BioShock Infinite is so much bigger in scale, like just in every aspect, the narrative, the gameplay. Yeah,
The visuals and the art style are incredible. And then they gave Bioshock 2 to some Australian team or something that
yeah,
hasn't
and it's
really done
still
anything.
it's good. I liked it, but it wasn't as strong as the other two.
Yeah, and like I never got far into the first or second game, but they do have a very strong artistic vision in what they are. Even the second game, which I don't
Yeah.
even know who directed that. I know Ken Levine wasn't involved to a serious degree.
Yeah, he was pretty busy with Infinite, I think. I think that one they I feel like they probably started working on that one pretty quickly after BioShock 1. And it was almost an Arkham Origin situation where 2K was like, well, we don't want to have to wait 6 years until you guys are done with Infinite, so we'll let another team hurry and push out BioShock 2 using the assets of the first game. Because that's kind of what it felt like. Uh, Even narratively, it followed a lot of the same patterns that the first game did, but at the end of the day, it's still a very strong game on its own. Some people think it's the best one, so
Some people think Bioshock 2 is the best one.
yeah.
Man,
And
they're
I think
wrong.
I agree, but I think that it's just that same deal. It's the same reason that some people will say Arkham Origins is the best one, even though they're wrong too. It's because just the tone is a little bit different than the other two, and I guess it just resonates with them a little bit more.
And you got the nostalgia factor where it might have been like their first game.
Yeah, I think
Because
that's generally the case with Origins in particular. I feel like people who say Arkham Origins is the best one, there's a good chance that
yeah, there's a good chance that they're actual children.
yeah.
And like granted that's okay,
Yeah,
but you gotta be subjective sometimes and not have your nostalgia rose tinted glasses on when talking about media. Like that's one of the reasons I got out of that community, which
hmm,
the first big reason was I got bored. Nothing was happening. Arkham as a series is dead.
yeah,
That series isn't coming back. Now the universe might live on through whatever Rocksteady is doing, but we're not going to get the free flow back. We're not going to get Kevin Conroy back, and they really made a mistake in having that drought that they had
I agree.
because it really like I'm not a comic book guy anymore.
Yeah, it really was detrimental because now, yes, like everyone's excited for DC games again, but it's much different than it was. It's not like these periodic Batman games. And I agree with you, like, even though the Suicide Squad game is going to be the next installment of the Arkham universe, it's very different from an Arkham game. I mean, they just came out, they're like, yeah, it's going to be an open world metropolis. You're going to play as these four characters. You can do it as co-op. And so even though it will likely retain a lot of the same plot threads of the original Arkham games and everything, it's going to be a completely different experience. So yeah, I definitely agree that Arkham as we know it is not coming back at this point.
And that was one of the things that got me into comics in the first place. So,
Yeah.
that's why like I forget what made me derail into this DC conversation, but yeah, no, that's just one thing that I think that they messed up on. It just like popped up in my head. As someone who's not interested in Gotham Knights, I think it looks like an Assassin's Creed game, which
Yeah.
has been echoed a lot in the community. This
Right.
game has split the Arkham community, I'd say 70-30. I'd say a majority of people aren't that excited for it.
Yeah, I think there's a good chance. Like I'm still pretty open to it just because of what the developers have said. It does have my interest. I will say that. Like I am on board to see what they have to offer, but part of me is like actually really excited that they're doing something completely different from Arkham, but at the same time it's that, well, will it work? You know, with Rocksteady and Suicide Squad, I have a lot of faith in them because it's Rocksteady and because they do have that Arkham narrative behind them that they are bringing into this game. So there is that inherent attachment. But with Gotham Knights, it is a completely new experience. And so it will, I think, really be dependent upon how the RPG elements play out and everything.
Because if it's like an Assassin's Creed game with the RPG elements where it's like you can't stealth kill somebody unless you have the
Yeah,
gear for it,
unless you're a higher rank than them and you have the gear. Yeah.
that'd be obnoxious. And there was actually a thing in the demo that I think was like that where Batgirl tried to stealth take down someone and it didn't work.
Yeah, that'd not be good.
And I'm not okay with that. That's too stupid.
Yeah, I like the narrative direction they're taking. I like the art style. There's a lot of things that I like, but there's still a lot that they're going to have to sell me on.
And they also need to keep Batman dead. Just kill
Yeah.
him. No one
Yeah.
wants him anymore.
Well, I think that that's a very good point though with the drought, because what happened I think was people's expectations got so insanely high, right? That like people were expecting, and I'm not even kidding here, people were expecting Gotham to be as big as like a GTA game, and they were expecting it to be like Red Dead Redemption 2 but with Batman, and that was never going to be the case. So
No.
it's really, I think, been harmful to these developers. And even with Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, I mean, I think people are very excited for it. I think that it had a great trailer, but there is that inherent, like, this is really what you've been working on for this amount of time, and we didn't know. Uh, and we're seeing that actually a lot with these types of games these days, where even going back to BioShock, I mean, they have announced BioShock 4 and they are working on it, but they've said it's still like years out. And I mean, the last entry was in 2013. And with Prince of Persia, now there's rumors that a remake is going to get revealed like this month or next month. But once again, I mean, it's been a decade since we got an entry in that franchise. So
Hmm.
it is interesting to see how they're trying to bring these things back. I will say that it almost seems like remakes to some degree are more successful than new installments for whatever reason. I know that with like Final Fantasy VII, the Resident Evil games, and I know that you were talking about one as well. There's been a lot of hype and excitement around these remakes, whereas with like obviously there's excitement and hype around Gotham Knights, but it's on a very different level, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, so in like 10 years' time, right, say Gotham Knights is a success, they're moving on to the third game in the franchise, right?
Yeah,
If they were like, okay, so we have a side studio who's doing an Arkham remake, where they're fully from the ground up remaking Arkham, people are going to be more excited for that.
yeah,
Just right out of the box. It overshadows everything. That's why I say Resident Evil has done two full remake titles
yeah.
for
And
years in a row.
they've arguably been as hyped up, if not more so, than some of the newer entries, like Resident Evil 7 and the new one that they've announced recently. Like there is excitement around it, but the hype levels when 2 remake came out was like off the charts. Like I remember that just being such a huge release, and it was a remake.
Yeah, and like same with Final Fantasy VII. And these companies are trying to do this task of remaking games that are so unbelievably loved. There is the second most highest rated game of all time was actually recently remade. Do you
Yeah,
know what game that is?
I don't remember.
Pro
Is that the one you mentioned? Yeah, you mentioned it. Yeah,
Pro
Pro
Skater
Skater.
2. And
Yep.
it's like it is kind of a goofy skateboarding game, but a lot of people don't realize how critically lauded those games are.
Yeah.
Like Pro Skater 2 is right below Ocarina of Time on Metacritic.
Yeah.
That game has a 98. I think Tony Hawk is a 97. And
Mhm.
then after that's like GTA 5 or something, or maybe
Right.
even 4. But like it's almost an impossible task to go up to a developer and ask them to remake it, because I feel like there's a difference between like a remake and a reimagining. I look at Final Fantasy VII as a reimagining because it's not the same gameplay, not the same art style. Everything is different. Same with the
Yeah.
Resident Evil games. I mean,
Yep.
they're just third-person shooters now, which is fine. They're modernizing the old tank control methods versus a game like Tony Hawk Pro Skater or the Spyro collection or the Crash collection, where they're actually full-on ground up remakes with all the same problems that the old games had.
Yeah.
Maybe with some new tweaks and modifications or whatever. And I feel like this is going to lead to a very weird period in gaming where when something's classified as a remake, no one will know what to expect with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I even look at Prince of Persia and the remake that has been alluded to with some of the leaks and whatnot, and a lot of really big insiders have actually confirmed that they have heard about this. And as of right now, we don't know what it is. Now, I would bet money that it's a remake of The Sands of Time because that's by far the most popular and most beloved. But I would expect a lot of changes just by the nature of that game is very outdated at this point. It was released in like 2003. So I would expect new mechanics. I'd expect more likely than not, they'll say this was made in the Assassin's Creed engine, and they'll probably have revamped the narrative and re-recorded voice lines and stuff. So yeah, I definitely agree. In the sense that it feels like there's 3 major ways that they update games, and that's remasters, which is where they it seems like they do minimal amount of works on those these days. They kind of just try and make it look a little better. You have remakes where it's like a shot for shot remake of the original game, and then you have reimaginings where they're called remakes, but they really are pretty much reboots of that game because
Mhm.
they take the same premise, but they do something completely different with it.
And then you have the ports where they just don't do
Yeah.
anything to the original game, like Dead Island or not Dead Island,
Yeah.
Dead Rising 1 and 2
Hmm.
on current gen consoles is just the original game with 60
Right.
FPS 1080p. Like they just didn't care. Same with Resident Evil 4. And the funny
Yep.
thing about Resident Evil 4 is that's actually the next leaked like remake in the Resident Evil franchise. That game is going to be impossible to remake, I think.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to go over well. That's still a relatively recent game. It was
Yeah.
only 16 years ago, 17 years ago. It was on the GameCube. And it's a relatively recent game. They've ported it to every console since then. You can buy the game on your toaster if you wanted to.
Right.
Like it's on PS3, PS4. It's going to be on PS5. It's on all the Xboxes besides the original. It's on PC. It had two separate PC versions, one done by Ubisoft and one done by Capcom. The Ubisoft one sucked.
Yeah.
Like that one was really bad because I remember there was no mouse control. You had to use the keyboard. I remember playing that as a kid
Oh,
and
that's
like
awful.
yeah, it was bad. But that game is so perfect.
Right.
Resident Evil 4 is a perfect game. It's perfect pacing, perfect everything. And the last Resident Evil remake was actually not that critically acclaimed because they
Yeah, they
shortened it,
didn't
right?
add yeah, they didn't add enough length to it. And the problem, so you can do that. You can make a game and say this is Resident Evil 3 remake. We didn't want to add too much to the story, so it is pretty much the same story that you experienced. It's about the same length. We didn't want to draw out the pacing too much. But then you have to charge it as a 30 or $40 game. You can't come out and be like $60 for a game that has the amount of content that a game from like 10 years ago would have.
Yeah, so like Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 and 2, the remake that came out, that's a $40 game. It's a
Yep.
budget title because there is content in the game for sure. It's not enough unless you're a diehard fan to keep you entertained for more than 6 or 7 hours.
Right. Well, you even look at Spider-Man Miles Morales. Chances are, because they're following suit with what the Lost Legacy did, there's a good chance that the game will be $40 or so. But that's a brand new game. So then when you have Resident Evil 3 that comes out and it's like 6 hours long or so, I don't remember how long it was, but I think it was like that long. I mean, that's $10 an hour that you're paying to play that game. That's really kind of egregious. So it's interesting to see how much acclaim these remakes are getting. I think that it has a lot to do with nostalgia, uh, but also I'm not exactly sure where this drive comes from because we're seeing this in movies too, particularly with superhero movies. Ever since the Snyder Cut got announced, it seems like every movie that gets released, everyone wants a director's cut now, or almost a remake. Like it's gone to the point where people are unironically petitioning for new cuts of the Joel Schumacher Batman films.
Isn't Joel Schumacher dead?
He passed away, but people want new cuts of his movies. There's like now this uh like whole, I don't want to say cult, but there's like now this whole group of people that really are pushing that Batman Forever was like a really great movie and that it just needs a new cut. And I'm like, it really wasn't. It's not going to be much better if you add the deleted scenes back in. Sorry to tell you, but
Also, you can call it a cult. It's true. I mean, you know how many of these nerds I see online who are talking shit to like some young artist?
yeah,
Like someone was shit talking David Ayer or whatever,
right.
and like I don't agree with that, but it was some guy who's like he was talking about the Ayer cut and he's like you're just gonna give us more of the things we didn't like, which I can kind of get.
Yeah.
And some guy responded like, "How about you make something that big and you can criticize it?" Which is a stupid argument.
Yeah, that's not, yeah. That
And
does
then
not
doesn't entail what you can and can't criticize.
yeah.
But I click on the guy's profile because I'm curious, and it says associate producer of Zack Snyder's Justice League, and I
I don't want to
started
be the guy to tell
crying.
them. I don't want to be the guy to tell these guys. So I actually think that Zack Snyder was really generous in being like, you guys are all associate producers of this movie because he helped make it happen. I think that's a great move. I think that's really nice of him. I don't want to be the guy to tell these people you're not getting a credit for this movie. Like you recognize that you're not like gonna be recognized at Warner Brothers as an associate producer of this movie. That's not what associate producer means. So
You can't put it on your resume. You're not going to be in the credits.
yeah,
This isn't like a YouTuber video where you get like a Patreon section at the
right.
end where it says 80
Yeah.
names. No one knows who you are unless you are actually associate producing. And
Well,
no
and I
one
have no
will know.
problem with people like taking that and just having it like, oh, this was something cool that I was part of. We really wanted this cut of the movie and we pushed for it. And so I don't have a problem if like someone puts it in their bio or something. But once they start using it and acting like it's like even in the case that you just mentioned where it's like, well, how about you make something like that? It's like, well, you realize you didn't work on Justice League, right?
No one worked on Justice League besides Zack Snyder and everyone on the crew. Like,
Yep.
and speaking of, that trailer has not inspired me with hope.
I think I'll enjoy it. I don't like the aspect ratio. I get that it's like the IMAX ratio and they want us to see the whole thing. It's not going to work on my TV. If it was in IMAX, I'd be more than happy, but it's just it's going to bug me with those bars on the side of the TV.
And it's also going to be egregiously long.
Yeah.
4 hours.
I'll watch it. Like I enjoyed BVS. I liked Man of Steel. I don't think they're great or anything, but I did enjoy them. I think I'll like Zack Snyder's Justice League, but I also don't think it's the second coming. I don't think that Jesus is gonna come sit on my couch to watch it with me.
A lot of people are acting like this is going to be a 10 out of 10 when it's most likely going to
Right.
be a 5 or a 6.
Yeah, like it'll be a good one-time watch. I don't know that I'm gonna go back and rewatch it though. I am interested to see what Snyder does, and I also think that it's good that he got this opportunity, just because the situation he was in was so tragic. But now we're seeing so many people who are like, "Wait a minute, this means we can fix every movie if we just get a director's cut," which really isn't the case.
That's never the case. I mean, Joel Schumacher cannot edit his movie, A, because he passed away,
Yeah,
and B, he doesn't have access to any of that footage anymore. When you're a director and you shoot something, you don't own any of it.
yep,
None of that is your property. That's property of the studio unless you're doing an indie film where it's all you. You have no access or right to that footage unless you do it on your own in like a back burner and you never release it. That's why that like they have done director's cuts where they haven't even been cut by the director. One of the
yep,
most notorious being I think was Blade Runner. The director's cut
uh-huh,
wasn't Ridley Scott. He did his own cut called the final cut, I think.
yeah,
And yeah, like we're gonna get to an era in filmmaking where the director's cut is just gonna be the executives throwing, the B-roll footage and whatever other shots that they have, and just swapping
yeah.
in and out scenes. I mean, like, here's this slightly better version that's 3 minutes longer. Here, let's throw it in theaters or on a streaming
Yep.
service to
Well, they did that
trend.
with Endgame, if you'll remember. Remember they re-released it like during its initial theatrical run, and they said, "Oh, this is the cut that has the Stan Lee memoir at the end, and we've also added a few scenes in the middle of it, and we have this like forward by the directors at the beginning." And I believe that they did something similar with Far From Home too. And it's very strange that like I think that you mentioned earlier that Marvel likes to watch their competition. I would not be surprised if that was inspired by the Snyder cut of, oh, people want to see the director's cut. So let's advertise, oh, this is the extended cut that has more information on the film.
I actually feel like a lot of it with the Endgame comes from the fact that they were only like 40 million away from Avatar's like goal.
Yeah.
So they're at like 2.17 billion and they need like 2.40 billion.
Yeah.
They're just like, we need to get this movie back in theaters ASAP.
Yep.
And like that just gave people an excuse to go watch it again to see the new scenes or to watch it for the first time in theaters. I feel like it was genius, even though I think it is cheating a fair bit.
Yeah. I
Then
agree.
again,
It's
Avatar was
yeah.
in theaters for like 2 years, right?
Yeah. Everyone kept going to see it, and it's not even that good. But
God, I don't remember a fucking thing about that movie. I remember he's crippled, like he's a
yeah.
disabled person.
Mhm.
Uh, Not Samara Weaving, but Sigourney Weaver is in the movie.
Yep.
She is tall. I remember that. I
Yeah.
remember he betrays his entire race to fuck a blue lady.
Yep.
Uh, Very weird movie. James Cameron
People
is a
people liked it for the 3D effects. That's really it.
like James Cameron's one of those auteurs where like he's a genius, but he's also a freak.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's so weird.
it's
And like,
it's true. Yeah.
granted, a lot of directors are like that. Like David Lynch. I don't know how big you are into his works.
Oh yeah, yeah. I kind of actually got into him like this last year. I listened to a podcast by one of my old editing professors, and he yeah, so I watched Eraserhead, and I was like so oddly entertained by it, but it's the weirdest, it's like top 3 weirdest movies I've ever seen in my life.
Eraserhead makes me physically ill.
Yeah, it's
The
so
scene
strange.
where they cut into the turkey and it starts shooting out like really thick ooze makes me actually retch.
Yeah,
And
but like
that's the point of it.
it's like hypnotic though. Like I couldn't stop watching. It was so weird, but I was like still just drawn in enough to like, okay, I have to see where this goes.
David Lynch had a cartoon that he just drew like 20 years ago called like Dumbland.
Yeah.
And in this cartoon, it's a guy drinking, and it's literally like a shitty sketch of a guy, and he has a beer in his hands. In one frame where he lifts the beer up and he goes, oh, oh, oh. And then this kid's running on a treadmill, and it's like really shittily animated. And the kid's like goes like, Dad, watch me. And the dad just goes, fuck you. And he punches him. And the kid goes flying through the wall and lands in the like yard. And then the dad like gets sent through the wall again, and then like I think he lands on a plunger, and the plunger goes up his ass, and
Yeah.
that's like, and it's like the dumbest thing I think I've ever seen,
And it's
but
like,
it
dude,
was
how did you
oddly
come up with
entrancing.
this? Like
It's really entrancing. You're like, what did Jack do?
yeah.
Which is one of my favorite short films of all time. I actually have the song from that movie on vinyl.
Yeah.
I ordered that on vinyl, and that's one of the most oddly hypnotic short films I've ever seen. I showed that to my mom. My
Yeah.
mom's not a film person, so the fact that I could get her to sit down and watch a 75-year-old man interrogate a monkey about being a communist and a murderer for
Yeah.
30 minutes, and she was entertained the
Yeah.
entire time by the dialogue because it was so random. Like there's things where he's like, "Are you a communist?" And then the guy goes
Yeah.
like, "Bullshit." And then they just start yelling at each other, and then a chicken walks by the door, I think, and the monkey starts chasing it, and then David Lynch pulls out a gun and starts chasing the monkey. He's one of those directors where everything I just said sounds like nonsense, but if you
Yeah, but you're
watch it,
so entertained watching it.
and then it makes sense.
Yeah.
Like Twin Peaks. Twin Peaks, I don't know if
Mhm.
you've seen it,
Yeah.
fantastic. That
It's
show
really good.
makes no sense.
Yep.
And like, granted, the second half of the second season is not that good, but the first season and a half is fantastic work. I don't
Yeah.
like television. That's the only television show that I can just sit down and watch.
Yeah. There's
That
very
isn't like a
few.
sitcom.
Hmm.
Like for me, it's like that '70s show in Twin Peaks, and that's it.
Yep. Yeah, I do sitcoms, and then there's like occasionally one that's really good. But yeah, for the most part, I long form television doesn't work as
Like I have a lot of friends who always preach about Breaking Bad, and I have generally no interest in Breaking Bad.
yeah, I that's one where I might sit down and try the pilot just because so many people talk about it. But yeah, it's very rare that I get sucked in. I remember somebody told me like, dude, you got to watch Hannibal because I really like Silence of the Lambs. So someone's like, yeah, dude, watch Hannibal. It's really good. And I couldn't even get through the first episode. Now, granted, I was like really tired when I tried it, but it always feels so drawn out and poorly paced to me. So I have a much harder time getting invested in long form entertainment.
Just watch Teen Wolf.
Yeah. What was the one Kobe wants us to watch? Vampire Diaries.
Yeah, yeah. Kobe is a huge Vampire Diaries freak.
I'm gonna try it just so that I can come on the podcast and like explain what I thought and see if I get as sucked in as he did.
I'm never gonna do that. I don't even want
Yeah.
to take the chance. Like, there's a 0.1% chance that I'll actually find Vampire Diaries like intriguing, and I do not want to be known as that guy.
Yeah,
Where
right?
I shit on like guys who are trying actual artistic things. Like, I'll be like, oh yeah, Tenet, 7 out of 10. But Vampire Diaries,
10 out of
10 out
10.
of 10. Will watch again. Best
Yeah.
show of all time. Because there's a bit of a difference between a shitty teenage show versus Christopher Nolan crashing a plane into a building on a $300 million budget and going, all right, let's do it again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Man,
Yeah.
Christopher Nolan is a Chad.
He really is. He's actually, I think, one of the most inspirational people for like young filmmakers. And I think that's why a lot of these like 15, 16-year-old kids think, oh yeah, I could make the next Batman movie. It's because he literally did. He like made a very indie film, The Following, on a very small budget. And then he made Memento. Then he did Insomnia. And then immediately he's doing the Batman trilogy. But I don't know, the way that I've always viewed that is that it's honestly not that different than working like a regular retail job. Like if you can't just walk into a like Target and be like, I want to be the manager here. Like you have to start with the low level stuff. You have to prove yourself. You have to stand out above everybody else, and it it becomes very toxic, which isn't necessarily a word I like to describe things with, but this is even something that I've seen in regards to my limited experience being on YouTube. And I don't want to name any names here, but it's interesting when you get people whose ego inflate really big, whether or not they're a YouTuber. Because I've seen both. I've seen people who become YouTubers and it's like they start smack talking or they start saying, "Oh, I'm not getting views because they're all getting stolen from me," and
Or
that just drives me up the wall.
my favorite is I don't know how YouTube payment works, so I get upset when someone doesn't pay me for a job.
Yeah.
What? It's
it
like,
it
okay, dude,
drives me up the wall.
you're a child.
Yeah.
It's
Well, yeah,
man.
and I'm sorry, but YouTube isn't a job. Like it is, and you can make a living off of it, but at the same time, to act like you're working really hard on YouTube, it's different. Now, I will acknowledge, and I feel like I can say this because I've made many, many YouTube videos. I will sit down and make a video, and it generally takes about 2 hours. Now, that is a lot of time. That's a lot of commitment to do it. But I would rather sit and work on YouTube all day long than go to work for 4 hours. And it's because it's just a different degree of work. And so it's not to say that it's not that you're not doing work, but to like sit and be like, I should be getting paid as if I'm doing a job. I don't know. It feels a little bit pretentious. But even moving outside of the YouTube space, I mean, I have so many of these like, fans who are younger who will sit and be like, yeah, you should make this video. And then they get mad when I don't. And it's like, dude, I have literally no obligation to do that for you. So I don't know. It's just so interesting how people can get up on their high horse and expect that they deserve to be the next Christopher Nolan or the next PewDiePie or the next like producer of a YouTube channel. It is a strange phenomenon that I see pretty frequently.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, YouTube as a whole, I'm not a YouTuber. It's a very unattractive platform for a creative just
It is.
because you really can't do much besides. I could make $1,000 for bullying a kid with mental deficiencies, or I could make a short film that I pour my heart and soul into and get 2,000 views and $5 off of it.
Yeah.
And that's really the main thing with YouTube is they have a big problem, and it's mostly the YouTube audience. I don't blame it necessarily on YouTube. They go for the lowest common denominator garbage content,
Yeah.
including us, subscribe. But
Right.
like not to name drop anyone specifically, but like these commentary YouTubers, the ones who just make videos like grilling or roasting people, it's not good content. It's not transformative, and it's not something you put a lot of effort into. Like
Yeah.
one of them was just recently released off the platform. Leafy.
Yep.
Leafy was super controversial because I remember there was one time where a kid I think had severe autism, and he just like made fun of the kid relentlessly. And the kid
Yeah.
made a video where he was crying. And it's like, okay, you're a piece of shit, Leafy. Like,
Yeah.
come on,
It
you
is.
gotta know.
I feel like it's a an interesting situation because I've noticed this as well. But there are times where I'll be streaming and I start getting like almost too personal with people. Like I'll start like talking about my life and what's going down, and I have to like stop myself and be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm talking to kids on the internet. These aren't like my best friends or anything. And I think that it becomes very easy to, when you're on YouTube or when you're on Twitter, to assume that what you say doesn't have as much weight to it or something. But if you start like, dissing somebody, that person isn't going to want to work with you. And it's really universal in everything. I mean, if you get on Twitter and start roasting, you know, uh, the Simpsons or something, and then say you start climbing up that ladder, there's a good chance that whoever's going to offer you a job is friends with a Simpsons writer or was a former Simpsons writer or something. And it's like if they see all your tweets where you're just clowning on it, they're not going to want to hire you. So I don't know. It's a hard balance, but when you're on social media, whether that's Twitter or YouTube, you don't want to be up on like this ego, and same with like those commentary channels like you mentioned. I mean, I used to be a fan of a lot of them, but it feels like it gets so incredibly, like you mentioned, it's just bullying at this point. And I have no problem like, goofing on people who are in like tough situations or something, or people who are like caught on camera being a dick or something. But when you're bullying somebody, it's very different.
Yeah,
And I
like
mean that can even range to just, bad mouthing somebody. That
and
doesn't
like
have to be you like, you know, being
for
belligerent to them.
yeah, and for me on the internet, the thing is like I feel like to be a bully on the internet, you really have to beat down.
Yeah.
And for someone like Leafy who had millions of subscribers, the thing he didn't realize, or he did realize and just didn't care, was he had a huge following of like 14, 15-year-olds who didn't know where the line was in terms of harassing people. And granted, there is no line when harassing people. Don't do it.
Yeah.
But it went past the point where it was just them joking on somebody. Like, Leafy had a huge problem, like I said, making videos about people who had mental disabilities, whether that be
Mhm.
autism or Down syndrome or anything like that. And it's like, that's beating down.
Yep.
Go after someone who can take you down. And eventually that's actually what ruined his career on YouTube
Yep.
was the whole iDubbbz thing, which was very interesting. I know that that video was also nuked off the internet
Yeah.
completely. That video was 40 minutes of him making fun of Leafy for not having a chin.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's one of the
Yeah.
greatest achievements I think has ever been done on this website because it was justice, you know?
Right. Well,
And
there's a
granted,
big difference between like, having beef with someone, but knowing that it's like you know that you're kind of mutually uh, armed against each other. Like you're not bullying somebody who is lesser than you, or who you're actually hurting by doing that. Uh, yeah, I agree with that.
which is why you'll never see me on this platform like beating down on someone. Like a few episodes ago, I called out someone for saying something dumb on Twitter, and I
Yeah,
used their first name to refer to them, and someone freaked out in the comments like,
yeah, I remember that.
"You can't do that," and I was like, "Well, I didn't say his name. I didn't say his at. I didn't even say who he was. I just said his
Yeah,
first name, and it was a
millions
very
of
common
people share
first
that
name."
first name. Yeah,
And it's like no one would know who I'm talking about unless you're directly friends with them, which is exactly why I did that.
yeah,
But you will see me call out people like James Cameron and call him a freak because I'm punching up. I
yeah,
know I'll never probably work with James Cameron. He's
yeah.
an older guy. I'm only 20. I'm not going to make it in Hollywood maybe ever or for at least a decade. So
Well, and that's also like you also get to look at that and say, who do I want to work with? Like if there's someone in the industry that you're like, I have absolutely no interest in working with them. So for example, Grace Randolph, she runs the Beyond the Trailer YouTube channel. She also has a resume, like a public resume for acting. She wants to act in things. She was in Zombieland too. I would never work with her because I know that she causes so much drama that I just have zero interest in. I'm like, why would I potentially? Now, maybe she's better behaved on a set, but why would I risk that? You know?
mhm.
So I think that that's part of it, is that you also get to have the other end of that and say, James Cameron isn't really someone I'd be interested in working with just because I know how he behaves on set. I've heard stories, versus just trash talking someone, uh, even if they are bigger than you, because you feel that they're, yeah, I don't know. It is definitely one of the most like, uh, ridiculously challenging balancing acts that I've had to learn. Uh, but I don't know. I think that what you're saying makes a lot of sense where, you never want to bully somebody, but you also have to look at the fact that like punching up, like you mentioned, like, trashing James Cameron's work or his movie or obviously I think that we both have a lot of respect for him, but both of us saying that we don't like Avatar and then, saying that he's a freak and whatnot. I mean, he's not going to hear that and be offended, you know?
Mhm. He's the one worth, $700 million or
Exactly.
whatever, and he's the one with a storied career who's eventually going to go down as one of the best directors of all time. Us
Exactly.
just clowning on him isn't going to ruin any like career opportunities in the
Yeah.
future. Now, granted, me clowning on like Kevin Feige for being bald, let me just add on to that. It's a joke, Kevin. Please
Yeah.
work with
Please.
me in like 20 years, please.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where I'll never actually take a personal shot at him
Yep.
because like just calling someone bald, it's fine.
Yeah.
Like two adults just talking to each other, just one adult making fun of another adult, just saying you're bald. It's not
Yeah.
even that big of a deal. It's just like
It's not.
it's me
But
going
yeah, if
like,
you're making fun of somebody because they're, autistic or something, that's a very different story.
no, like you're never gonna see me
Yeah.
like that movie Shia LaBeouf made with the guy with Down syndrome. I'm forgetting the name. I think it's Peanut Butter Falcon,
That's it.
and that's a fantastic movie.
Yeah.
If any interviewer made fun of that kid, their career would be done.
Yep.
If any critic did anything like that, because that's just fucked up. That guy did amazing.
Yeah. But on the
And
other hand, if an interviewer, made some jokes about Shia LaBeouf and Transformers on that interview tour, there would be no problem. It would be like just in passing. Like,
it's about punching up if you're gonna do something like that.
mhm.
Take a risk. I mean, do you remember the guy that Will Smith slapped because he tried kissing him?
Yeah. Yep.
Don't do that. That's not
Yeah.
punching up. That's just being weird. But if you're
Yeah.
gonna like just grill somebody, go for it.
Well,
I
and
have
one
no
other
problem
thing
with
I'll
that.
add to that in regards to punching up is like if you actually are involved with somebody, if you have said yes, I will work with you, do not trash them. Like talking about Shia LaBeouf, for example, I remember when Indiana Jones 4 came out. He started talking trash about the movie. He was like, "Yeah, Spielberg's kind of a hack. It wasn't that good." And Harrison Ford and Spielberg both got like extremely pissed at him because they're like, "Dude, you agreed to work on this movie. You signed off on the script. You were like, "Yep, I'm down to do this." And you followed the direction. You were in the movie, and now you're going to be like, "No, it wasn't that good." Like that's such a pathetic way to behave. And if you have beef with someone that you know personally, you have to take it directly to them. You can't just start bad mouthing them publicly because then they don't want to work with you. I mean, there's people, and I don't want to call anybody out, and I'm not even talking about YouTubers. I'm talking about even celebrities and stuff who have just rocked the boat so much in movies that they've been in that I just don't have interest in bringing that kind of energy onto the set or bringing someone who's potentially going to badmouth me after a film releases that I'm part of. There are exceptions. Like I think that like what John Boyega recently said about Star Wars, I actually think that he had a point and he had a reason to be kind of upset over that. And it was different because he wasn't like trashing Star Wars and he wasn't trashing like even the directors directly. He was just saying I felt disappointed that this was how they treated my character. But there's other individuals who it's like I don't have your whole story, and yet you're out here taking public shots at all these individuals. It's like I mentioned, it's just such a ridiculously hard balancing act because you want to be able to have like a good sense of humor and be able to take criticism and tell jokes at each other. I mean, that's like one of the best things about being on the podcast and stuff is that we're not afraid to like roast each other a little bit. Like at the beginning here, I just said that Salvage and Slickmoff had irritable bowel syndrome, which obviously isn't true, but I know that they're not going to get pissed about that.
Oh no, they're
But
actually dead. That they're not going to get pissed because they actually did pass away in an unfortunate bowel
oh yeah,
accident.
I just saw that email as well. They both
Yeah,
were life flighted to the same hospital, and one bird got sucked into the helicopter propeller, and they
that's all
crashed.
she
So
wrote. But at least the
yeah,
podcast is mine now. You know what I mean?
right, yeah,
So yeah, it's one of those things where like obviously if I'm working with like Steven Spielberg, I'm not going to make a joke like Yeah, Spielberg couldn't make it to the meeting today. He shit himself.
Yeah,
And then he
yeah,
hears about that, and he's like, "What the fuck? What?"
yeah,
Like, why the fuck would he say that?
yeah.
It's one of those things where you really got to know who you're with professionally. Like,
Mhm.
if you know someone in a personal context, but you work together professionally, make all the jokes you want. If you know someone in a professional context and you're just friendly towards each other, do not do that.
Yeah,
Do not do that. I interviewed a guy who worked on a bunch of films that I had no interest in, but he's a part of the industry, and
yeah,
even though he's not like a big person in terms of the industry, I'm not gonna be like, oh, you made Zombie Bride Girl 2?
yeah,
I'm not gonna like grill
yeah.
his work because he's worked on something.
Yep.
I haven't.
Yeah, it's all about knowing the time and place and knowing, is this something that I should say publicly, or is this going to hurt me professionally or in my endeavors? But yeah.
I
Oh, one
mean,
thing I did want to mention too is that we didn't really get any good life advice questions this time, but we did get a good one that I want to do when we have everybody, which was how did we all meet? I know how Slick and Salvage met, but I don't want to tell that story for them. So we'll definitely address that one next time.
alrighty. So, are we wrapping up, Jake?
Unless there's anything else you want to talk about, I think we've covered everything on that list. So
I don't think so. Well, we are in episode 14, right? Like, I'm not gonna mess
yeah,
this up.
yeah,
So, thanks everybody for tuning into episode 14 of the Anonymous Throwdown podcast. Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell notification icon just so you get notified whenever we upload. We upload every Sunday between any time between like 8 and 10 Eastern Standard, which is what, 5 and 7
yeah.
Pacific.
We're a
So
little inconsistent, but we'll try to do better.
yeah, so it's just like an unfortunate side effect of doing a podcast the day of. I mean, right now it is
Right. Well, and when you have four
7:40.
people, when you have four people who all have like busy lives, I mean, I don't know of any one of us that doesn't have like a full-time job and is like doing something with school or some other career endeavor. So I think that's just a consequence of us all being busy. Same reason that we're not on other platforms yet. We are trying to get onto like Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We'll let you guys know when we've got that more squared away. We are looking into it. We know that some of you have requested it, but when you have four people who are this busy, it is tricky to navigate around some of that, but we will work on that as well.
Yes, sir. But I'd like to thank everyone for 3 months of the podcast. We're pretty successful. We're about halfway to our monetization goal, which
Yep,
if we get monetized, we get custom channel art. We get
that's right.
onto more platforms. We can do things like that instead of just pulling money out of our own pockets. So
Exactly.
we very much appreciate it. So again, just like to thank everyone for tuning in to episode 14, and we will see you all next time.
Yep, we'll see you.
Peace out.